This is Ed. Welcome back to Global TV Talk Show. As you could see, this is, well, you can't tell because there's no signage, but that's San Diego downtown, which is, from a real estate point of view, it's a hot ticket. From an employment point of view, there's not too many companies in downtown. They're all up in La Jolla and near UCSD in the suburbs. And so there's a concerted drive by the powers that be, the economic powers that be, to fill buildings with offices and bring people into downtown. And it's not happening today, but they say it will. So it's a beautiful place, and I welcome you to show up someday and we'll go out for a walk and bar hop. Very special guest today, all the way from Zurich in Switzerland. Angie Weinberger, thank you for being on the show again. It's been a long
Hello.
time.
Yeah,
Welcome.
it's been a while.
Yeah, okay. And so what time is it there? Almost 5, you're 5 p.m.?
Yeah, it's like 4:30-ish.
Okay,
Exactly.
great,
Yep.
great.
And it's
And
hot today.
yeah, 80s, 90s?
I guess that's 90s, it's about 30 degrees. Christian will be able to translate
yeah.
it for me.
Yeah.
That's too hot without
Sweltering.
air
Yeah.
conditioning. Yeah,
Yeah.
Swiss version of Indian summer
Yeah.
yeah,
starting now.
It's
yeah.
fresh in the morning and at night, and then during the day it gets still quite hot, which is beautiful. It's really beautiful weather.
So do you go out on the lake to cool off?
Yeah, when I have time. At least my feet.
That's cool. I remember some years ago, last time we were there, it's probably pre-COVID.
Mhm.
Joanne and I, well, I put on a meeting there, and we also had some friends who live in one of those hillside enclaves overlooking a beautiful home. So we went out on the lake with them because they're natives. Really interesting place. Like to do it again. Also with us is Stephen Howard, who's a book author, as you all know out there on this show, been on this program many times. And you've published 22 books and 23 is in the oven. Is that correct?
23 is already published. That was one with Ali, and 24, 25, 24 is in the oven, 25 is in preparation, and 26 in the back of my brain. So we're working away this summer.
Good for you. Wow. Productivity. Okay. And also here is Christian Ternetten, also in Southern California, frequent guest and commentator. So I don't know whether you all know, but his daughter is Gen Z, and we had a show dedicated to Gen Z. Yeah. So do you want to give our audience a quick look? Is there hope for Gen Z from your perspective?
I think there is. I definitely think that there is, but I also think that a lot of things have to change, be it in the workplace, be it sometimes also in education. The whole notion of mental health being in the foreground is something that a lot of people definitely have to adapt to. The notion that it's quite common that gender is a fluid concept, which I learned about in the 90s at the University of Zurich when it was kind of started, is definitely something that a lot of people have to get used to, because that's a reality for Gen Z.
Fluid content?
Gender is a fluid concept. That's just, you just have to wrap your head around it. And it's very, very common to talk about it. And it's very common to, particularly here in California, that it is something that you just have to work with as a not Gen Z member.
Dr. Ken Lloyd, welcome back.
I needed someone from Gen Z to get Zoom to work for me. It was just fighting me constantly. And finally, I just held down the space bar and it all came to life. So don't ask. I kept looking up ways to get this thing to work.
Okay.
It was fighting me this morning, but it's nice to see all of you. Angie, so nice of you from the other side of the globe. Great to see you too. And it's just nice to be here. Yeah, but need some more Gen Z activity. If you ever need help, go to anyone in that generation and they'll do it with their eyes closed. So anyhow, good morning and good afternoon or evening to all.
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so this is the book report, which is the new name, the theme of when we talk about books and authors. And Angie Weinberger has a library, and she's a great resource for not just women, but other people who are trying to do more in the workspace and dealing with emotions and dealing with previous attitudes that somehow don't work in the workplace, and trying to help people. You try to help people deal with work structures, rules, and customs that are strange, quote unquote strange. What would you describe better than I just did, Angie?
So from what I do generally, I think my focus in 2024 has largely been on helping global leaders, people who run global teams, to become more inclusive. So, everything that was just said, I think rings a bell, including different generations at work, making sure that people also take care of their mental health at work. So there's a lot of things that leaders nowadays need to think about. And in coaching individuals, what I noticed over the years is that there's always a certain journey that especially leaders of global virtual teams go through. So I packed this journey into a workbook, because this is what I like to do when I notice that I'm repeating myself like a broken record. I like to write things down. And I'm not like Stephen, I'm full of admiration for you. I've only managed to write about 4 workbooks so far. Number 5 is in the pipeline, and I have to write another book that I haven't even started with on global mobility from a technical HR perspective. And so for me, this is really the way I process a lot of the things that I'm working with my clients with. So the last book that I published is the book that I wanted to talk to you about today.
And the book is called?
It's called, hold on, because it's a mouthful. The Global Rockstar Album, 21 Verses to Find Your Tact as an Inclusive Leader.
Wow, global rock
There's a lot
star.
about music. So
That's generational.
shall I share my slide quickly?
Yes, please.
So let me just show you because on the slide you will then also see the cover, which my graphic designer Marie has created.
Okay, enlarge.
Can you see it?
Yeah, but it needs to be
There you
larger.
go.
Okay. Yeah, okay. If you can go up another 10%, that'll be great. But it's okay now.
So it's basically a international rock band on the cover.
Yeah, look at that. And diverse, I see.
Yeah, and yeah, we picked the diverse theme on purpose, obviously, because it's all about inclusion and making sure that everybody feels included in the team to develop purpose, performance, and productivity. And when Christian just mentioned mental health, I thought it was also important to think about, okay, how does the journey actually start? So the journey of most leaders will start with a health check. So I have split the books into verses. So, as it says, it's 21 verses. And then the first 7 books are sort of focusing more on the self, on health, mental health, on your life goals, on your personal short-term, long-term goals. And then the next 7 chapters focus more on building a team, and the last one more on building more, like building an empire. Do you have any questions for me right now from what you're hearing?
The latest iteration of DE&I and ESG in today's Wall Street Journal is in the headlines saying companies are ditching all their previous efforts and investments.
Well, I think there's a part of that is true, but I think there's also part that is not true according to the data. I just read an article today that says there is a backlash, yes, but there's also still a lot of companies, not only in the US, but everywhere in the world, who work on diversity, equity, and inclusion efforts. Now, this is a very specific part here that we're talking about. It's basically inclusive leadership. And I honestly think every leader in the world, no matter what cultural background, no matter what kind of team they're leading, needs to learn these things. So it's basically a book for everybody who's ever managed one person and above.
I want to bring in Stephen Howard, leadership coach.
I'm just going to stop the sharing, okay? So that we can.
Yeah, we'll go back to it. So, Stephen, what's your take on this? What Angie is talking about the imagery that you just saw, and like in today's Wall Street Journal is headline news that companies are ditching all this stuff. So maybe not. But what do you think?
I like the imagery, and we talk about Gen Z. I think it'll appeal to the Gen Z and the younger generation of leaders as well as and the baby boomers, because us baby boomers are still living in our rock and roll lives, I think, or a lot of us are. So I think it'll apply. I think DEI is going to be kind of under the cover, so to speak. I mean, this last week, Brown-Forman, the maker of Jack Daniels, publicly announced that they're going to stop their DEI initiatives, at least publicly talking about it, because of the backlash that they fear from consumers. We know what happened to Bud Light last year with their campaign with the transgender spokesperson. But I think people are going to have to continue to be inclusive. There's no doubt about it. But then inclusivity goes beyond gender, it goes beyond race, it goes beyond sexual orientation. It has to include things like including the introverts, including people who have different ways of thinking, different ways of working. I was coaching a manager last week who was very frustrated with one of his team members who he had given probably about a 12-week assignment to. And after 4 weeks, the person hadn't really shown any progress, hadn't really started on it. And that was frustrating the manager. And I asked the manager, when you were in college and you had a term paper, when did you start your term paper? The day after the professor gave him the assignment. I said, what about the other people in your classroom? When did they start? Oh, they usually started 2 weeks before it was due. I said, maybe this is what your employees like. They work under deadlines. They work under pressure. They're not the kind of person who's going to start the project 8 weeks in advance. So that's being inclusive. You have to be inclusive to how people work. What's their working style? Are they going to get the job done? Are you confident? And he said, yeah, I'm confident, but I'm frustrated. I said, well, throw frustration out the window and go get a cup of coffee and remain confident.
Ken?
Yeah, I think that the 3 letters of DEI have taken on a political connotation that a lot of companies want to stay away from, while at the same time being fully committed to diversity, inclusivity, equity, equitable treatment, and moving down that road. I just think they want to stay away from that term because of what's happened to its, if you will, emotional charge in society. But I think it is still very much at the forefront because companies recognize, number one, it's smart. If we engage in practices where we have a diverse workforce in all respects, just like Stephen said, well beyond race, color, religion, gender, sexual orientation, going wider than that, we're going to be more successful because we want to hire really good people. So rather than just saying, hey, this is DEI, we're doing it for the numbers, we're doing it because it's the right thing to do, it's the smart thing to do, and it's very much alive out there, although it has a new label. It's just called being smart, being effective, being fair, being appropriate in today's world and relevant. That's really where it falls in. So I think there will be a continued need for companies to focus on it as part of being smart and successful and effective in today's workplace and in today's work environment.
So, Stephen, people want to be seen, be heard, belong, the three Bs, be seen, be heard, belong. And that, it's not new. It's been around forever.
No, it's not new. I think what is new is that because of the pandemic, a huge portion of the population reevaluated what do those terms mean to them and what role does the work play in their life. And are you going to live to work or do you work to live? And so I think yeah, people want to be included. And one of the things I think that scares managers is they say, well, we can't include everybody. We'll never make a decision. And, you know, my counsel to them is you're not including everybody maybe in the strategy, in the development, in the direction, but you need to include the people who are going to be involved in the execution. You need to include them earlier about the execution and ask them important questions like what hurdles or obstacles do you see if we go down route A? And what obstacles and hurdles do you see if you go down route B? But then take it a step further. And too many people always focus on the negatives. Ask those people going to implement. If we go down route A, what are the other opportunities that we're not seeing? What do you see that might be even better if we go down route B? And then the same question for route B and route A. You know, tell us what are we not seeing, because we as management are not at the coalface. We're 2 or 3 levels away from the customer interface. Tell us what you think. And that's what people want. And that's what leadership is about.
So, Christian, you grew up near where Angie is sitting right now.
Yeah.
Tell us about that.
Yeah, just to explain that in
Yes.
case it gets complicated. So I'm sitting in Orange County, California, where I moved 24 years ago, but I moved from Zurich, Switzerland, where Angie's sitting. And the other day, I think I told you, Ed, that my high school is actually about 20 minutes from where Angie is. So it's a very strange coincidence. That's how I see it in my life, that we're now, you know, sitting here talking, and it's just going across the Atlantic and across continents. My take on what we've talked about is bicultural, I guess, because I'm of course seeing what's going on in the United States with regards to the E&I and the connotation that Ken was talking about. But I also have my memories of what Swiss work life was like 25 years ago. I'm fully aware it's changed. I have both of my brothers are in Switzerland in the workforce. But you know, it was a very conservative in a lot of ways. The managers more often than not were officers in the Swiss Army. So you had a strong culture of do as you're told, don't ask too many questions. And I see that is definitely changing in Switzerland, and Angie, you can contradict me if I'm wrong. Still around, but changing. And what I just strongly feel, since we talked about Gen Z earlier, is a lot of the backlash just won't work at some point. That's what Ken's saying. It's about being smart, right? One thing that Stephen mentioned, maybe implicitly, neurodivergence. That's going to be a huge topic, because if I look around what my kids are saying, there's so many kids that are neurodivergent, that are on the spectrum. These kids are going to have a job at some point. You know, the managers are going to have to take your example, Stephen, but then throw in that factor too. They are going to have to neurodivergent, being on the spectrum, autistic to some degree, ADHD, so neuro with an N. And it's going to be a reality in the workplace. And the do as you're told kind of way of leading is not going to work.
So, Angie, when you're dealing with Well, let me ask you, is your clientele primarily female?
No, that would be wrong to say. I think it's actually totally mixed when it comes to gender and cultures and also locations. So that's why I don't want to focus on Switzerland or the US from a location perspective. But I can say that, you know, one of the reasons why for me this is probably now coming a bit more naturally as a leader is because I live in a country that is very basic democratic.
Mhm.
So here it's very normal to involve everyone and that everyone has a say because of the political system in Switzerland. However, as Christian rightly said, there's also this issue that women didn't have voting rights until 1971,
Yeah.
which is almost in my lifetime. And in some cantons, they only got voting rights in 1990. And when it comes to gender equality, Switzerland is way behind many countries in the EU and way, way, way behind the US. So even something that seems very basic in Switzerland wasn't here when I moved here, when it comes to, you know, how women are seen in the workplace. Now, what I think is important, and I agree with everything you said, and also all of the groups that you talked about, we have included in the book. We even have researched apps that are helpful. For example, if you have ADHD, PTSD, if you're on the spectrum, we thought a lot about introverts, because also one of the things that happened during the process with my own team was that we developed a new way of working together. And I became a more inclusive leader unintentionally. Not that I thought earlier that I wasn't inclusive, but I also noticed that I'm Gen X. I'm also a bit set in my ways and also not always open to innovation, not always providing psychological safety. But in the process, we also learned a lot as a team. Now, and I have obviously introverted people on my team that are very detail oriented and drove me crazy. But that's actually one of the reasons why the book is such a great book at the end of the day. It's because we brought all of the talents together. And all of the talents means everybody brings in their biggest strengths. We have, in addition to the book, you get an app. Yeah, you can work on our RockMe app. And we have a programmer who's basically, he's just a rock star programmer. Our graphic designer is amazing. She has better ideas than I have. So I have people on my team that are better than me in what they're doing. And I think this should be the goal of every leader, to bring together a bunch of people and, you know, have such an environment of trust and psychological safety where you feel, well, even in a totally virtual environment, that, you know, you can really create magic together.
Stephen.
I don't know how to follow that up. I was going to say, yay, Angie, good job. But, and I like the way Angie's approaching it. I know in my latest book, which I co-wrote with Ali Sharma, a former senior manager at Boeing, we took the approach, because we didn't want to write a 600-page book, but we took approach of how do non-Americans partner successfully with American firms. So we looked at it just in a two-way between non-Americans and understanding the American business mindset, like things like time is money. But all this is, you know, basically comes down to being human and understanding each other. I mean, one of the things I've often had people criticize my American colleagues on is that, hey, how come they never stay? How come they never spend a day or two to learn about our culture? How come they never spend a day or two to, you know, visit our temples or visit our museums? Or, you know, why as soon as the meeting over do they change their flight and get on a plane and go home? And there's some very good reasons for that from an American business mindset. Now, on the other hand, Americans would be well off if we changed our mindsets and understood that a little bit better and understood that, hey, we could really create better relationships if we did spend that extra day in someone's country, you know, toured their museums, went on a tour, you know, went to somebody's house for a dinner or whatever, just to get to know the local culture. And that's probably an area that the American business community needs to improve in.
I learned this the hard way when I was assigned to India back in the day for an outsourcing project. And that totally changed my perception of the world. So, for example, I learned a lot more about relationship building and networking in India than ever in Germany before. And that was really helpful for the rest of my corporate life, but also especially important for building a business in a country where I wasn't even a citizen of yet, and a woman.
You know, all you guys are, the two of you anywhere, in the mobility business. And I think one of the, people don't talk about this, but at least in my experience, I was an expatriate. Well, I spent most of my life living outside the United States. So I was an expatriate in the corporate world for like 13 or 14 years. And I think one of the benefits for me personally is I got to learn different cultures. I got to make this understanding. So, you know, one of the benefits, whether someone's on a 2-year assignment or multiple assignments for multiple years, is when they come back to their home country, they're better positioned to be a better human being, to help the world, you know, help make the world a better place through better understanding, just like we're talking right now. You know, you're sharing your India experience. You know, Christian sharing his experience as an expatriate in the United States. You know, my life overseas. We can be better human beings and be better exemplifiers of being a better human being but because of that experience. So hopefully corporations will start to learn that's one of the non-company benefits of that. Sorry, Christian, go ahead.
No, sorry, didn't want to interrupt you. But one of the things that oftentimes aren't really talked about in connection with what you just said is if you just reduce what you said to the workplace, okay, and just apply it there, not saying that it shouldn't be applied everywhere, but just apply it there. These people coming back will more likely than not have a lot of people from other cultures in their American, in their Swiss, in their, you name the country, workplace, because of the way international economics and the business life work. So I told my team that when they had domestic relocations with people that had just arrived from India the year before, did they understand necessarily how to check out a lease and find out an American lease and find out whether the terms were correct? Did they really know the American culture? No, not necessarily. But it was a domestic move. So approaching this with a domestic mindset and assuming that just because it's a domestic move, the person moving knows everything that's going on in the United States about how to set up, you know, a new life somewhere else in the United States was just wrong. It was misleading, and it would lead to mistakes, to errors that were significant. So coming back into the workplace today, more likely than not, coming in from another country, you'll have exactly what Angie just said. You'll have a better understanding of the people from other cultures that are already in your workplace, because you can think in several different cultures. You're curious. You know, you're more likely than not, you would want to find out more about these people from these other cultures and their cultures and what makes them tick.
So Angie, let me ask you a question, off the wall question here. Again, audience, this is not rehearsed. So it sounds like you have the makings for running, writing or developing, you know, perhaps with others, a TV talk show that is set in an office situation with all the different people interacting, in a workday situation. And then that would enable the audiences out there in the world to view this sort of like the old Friends TV show.
Mhm.
Brought people together who were different and they were friends. And the shows were about how they interact with each other about everyday stuff.
Do you have a Hollywood producer in mind we could ask for that? Because
I
I
think
would
Stephen
totally
Howard.
go, totally. I would be totally happy to come to California and
So we have a
record a
couple.
series of whatever soap operas on working together in a global environment. I don't know if you're all aware, but I've been in the intercultural field for a long time, sort of as a side gig. So my main career was in HR and global mobility, but I started about probably 25 years. I started to learn about intercultural training, and then I became an intercultural coach. And
So that was in Germany, right?
actually in Portland,
Portland.
Oregon. Yeah, so where I learned from the best, I have to say. When I was still quite young, I already started to work in the intercultural space. But one of the problems we never really managed in this industry is we never really sold well what we're doing. And I have a feeling that DEIB is going down a different path. The issue is more that it's become such a political topic. So for me, to see that nowadays, almost everybody has to do with global mobility and intercultural competence, and every manager has to deal with that. Gives me such a big satisfaction. But I'm pretty sure, if we dig a bit deeper, the things that you're describing, Ed, they created videos about that 30 years ago. I mean, they look funny and everything, and they're filmed in a funny way, but there are these like really old, like intercultural, we call them critical incidents. And there are videos about that. How do you deal, for example, with a person in India who tells you that it's Diwali and they cannot finish the project on time because they cannot. Yeah, there are other things to do. So, yeah, I think it would be nice to do something like that. It's a great idea. If you have somebody in mind, I'd be happy to come to Hollywood.
I think it'll be virtual.
No, the Swiss Germans all go to Orange County.
Well, Angie, I
We'll
have the
hang
name
out
for your
here.
show. It's called The World of Work, and it encompasses all that we're talking about here. But what's interesting is that as we've talked about, whether it's internationally, understanding different cultures, as well as within the various countries, within the US, you can't just say, hey, it's just this homogeneous entity. We know, putting aside the political divides, there are different cultures within this country, different areas.
Yeah.
If you're talking about people in different parts of the country, you may find very different ways of speaking, of listening, of handling the work. Maybe the speech is a little slower. That does not mean that they are at all slower. The idea is to be as sensitive as we can to the people with whom we're dealing across the board, treating them with respect and with trust, but truly listening, observing, understanding, maybe doing some homework. What's it like to do business in X? Just like the book that Steve has written. If you want to partner with US companies, what should you know about that? We'd want to do the same type of thing if you're going to another area, certainly across this country, to understand the culture and understand the individuals with whom you'll be dealing. Because that's really an additional formula for personal happiness as well as for success. But yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing The World of Work. When's it going to air? Well, I do have a second question, if I could ask Angie. I noticed in the title of your book, you use the word verses. Can you tell us more about what that means? I don't think it's poetry, but maybe it's poetic to the ears. When you say verses, how did you frame that?
Yeah, so, I was looking at the creative genius idea behind the book is that it's a song. It's basically set up like a song. And it also has every verse has a tact. And also the word tact has a double meaning. So it's, first of all, you could think of it as the tact of a machine, but you could also think of being tactful, having, know how to treat people in a human way, making sure that you're not hurting anyone accidentally. So every one of the 21 verses has 8 counts. So if you're a musician, you probably understand that easily. It took my team a while to get it. I just took the inspiration from the music that I heard as a child. So, and I also, I don't know if you noticed, but the whole setup, with the flower, that reminded me a lot of my childhood. Maybe Christian, you remember, we had these, in our dishwashing liquids, we always had these little stickers. They always looked like that. But it was a complete coincidence, I think, that the designer came up with this idea. So the rock music is something that I took away from being a child of the 70s with parents who really loved any kind of American music, any kind of music from everywhere in the world. And that was sort of the inspiration for the rock star in itself. And then after every verse, there's also a song. And that song is about having a voice. Because this is something I want to teach my clients. If I can teach them something, especially the diverse clientele, the rainbow talent, the women, the quiet voices, that they have a voice and that they're listened to and heard. So there's this it's a bit like a poem, sorry. And then the poem also repeats later on after another 7 verses. There's a bit of an artistic touch to it.
Oh, this is really diversity 101, but really in practice. And so when did you move from Germany to Portland, Oregon?
I never moved. I was just there for summer school.
Ah, I see.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, because 20 years ago in the intercultural field, this is where everybody went. So I don't know if you heard of Milton Bennett and his
Yes.
unfortunately deceased wife, Janet Bennett. They started this school. And it's the Institute of Intercultural Communication. And it was very famous across the world. So, if you wanted to learn from the best people, this is where you went for a summer course.
Yeah, fascinating.
Yeah.
And from there, you got hired by KPMG or PwC or
At the time, I was working at Deutsche.
Deutsche.
And then, as I said, they sent me to India to help with an outsourcing project. And that was really life-changing experience. And then PwC headhunted me in Germany. And then I transferred to Switzerland with PwC.
That's great.
One-way transfer, which is happening more and more often.
Yep.
And way back then, one way means you want to take this job and you're going to have to build a life and we don't want you to come back.
You don't get a return ticket, basically. It's a transfer from one local contract to another local contract.
No home leave.
I can't understand why a company wouldn't want this person, you, with all this new training and skills. You'd be such an asset.
Why they wouldn't want me back?
Yeah, why wouldn't they give you a return ticket or send you to the next assignment?
Honestly, I think my manager was a bit annoyed with me. Why would you go to Switzerland? This is so small. You have no options there. Here, we can give you everything. Yeah.
Well, the company always has the option of bringing the one-way transfer back too, Ed. I mean,
Sure.
they're trying to keep control of the situation. There's no guarantee of employment. There's no benefits or benefits that are guaranteed of moving them back to their home location. So it's an unfortunate way, again, of leading people. It's not necessarily the most humane way of leading. I mean, it's an option and people accept it, like Angie accepted, then that's great. But if that's a corporate policy, then one has to wonder about the ethos of the company, if that's the policy.
It's a lot cheaper to send someone somewhere one way and then decide to bring him back later than to do an assignment with ongoing assignment benefits, paying for kids' private schools, et cetera, et cetera.
Oh, yeah. And then, I don't know about the world today, but in my case, I mean, home leave was one of the kind of basic aspects of any expatriate package. You got the round trip ticket back to your home location, and everyone used that to travel somewhere else other than their home location. And we all went on vacation. We all went to holiday in Africa and Europe and in the Middle East or around Asia, but very few of us ever went back to headquarters during our home leave.
Eventually somebody caught on to that.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Those were the golden days, Christian.
No, I mean, I've moved many people with home leave benefits. That's why I brought it up, that I could see that during my 20-year career, I could see that changing from the classic, you get home leave, you get all these benefits, with maybe paying for your kid's private school somewhere, very, very expensive assignments where the idea was, yes, just like Ed said, you would be brought back, you'd have a position there, maybe even a promotion, to no, we'll send you somewhere, we give you destination services, temp housing, maybe house of good shipment, and then you figure it out. And when we want to bring you back, we'll offer you a return trip, and you may or may not take it. A lot of people I moved didn't take it, were canceling the relocation because they're not moving back. Maybe they were just like Angie said, they were headhunted and in the country where they moved to, and that's where they're staying. Which is the risk if you send somebody one way, that they're staying there.
So, Stephen, you at the time you were in Asia, you with Citibank, or was that some other company?
Citibank was I was actually with 4 different multinational companies over about 15, 16 years as an employee, and then I left the corporate world and remained in Asia. But yeah, Citibank was the last of the 4 that I worked for.
Interesting times. Okay, so Ken, how does this fit in with your book?
I kind of want to revert back, if it's okay, to Angie's book for a second. And as I think about it, where you have some, if you will, some rhythm to it, a pattern, you have musical references and the writing. To me, on top of your content, by doing that, I look at it as making it far more memorable. One of the ways that we remember things, think of, songs from way back, all the words to it. I remember, I still know the words to Invictus by William Ernest Henley that I learned in the 8th grade. I think my point is that your book is going to have a lot of memorable information, but the way that you phrased it with verses and with some of the musical type interludes and all, I think is going to take the content and make it much easier for your readers to recall and apply after reading it. So I think it's a brilliant way to go. And I think it's going to have a much greater impact than a lot of standard kinds of books that may touch on these topics. You've taken it to a more educational / didactic level. And it's just the memorable aspect of it really strikes me as being something kind of beyond the usual books that are out there. I think it's just a great way to present this type of information.
Thank you. That's great to hear. It's a good feedback for me. That's what I really also intended, to also give my work basically to a larger audience, because not everybody can afford coaching, obviously. But then, you can at least do this program with the book for whatever, price of a pizza in Switzerland. And we were very careful to take out the background, the academic background, the models, and things you would normally expect in a management book, because this is really a workbook. It's a program for you to work with, like a self-help book. So all of this, obviously, people can read on, and, I give them a book list as well if they want to deepen some of the knowledge. And they can also contact me through the app if they have any specific questions or topics.
Take Ken's ideas and make it a Broadway musical if Hollywood won't make it a TV show.
There we go. Even better.
Yeah, I would love somebody who would actually be happy to write a melody for that song. I don't think I can do that, but I would love somebody to do that. So if anyone feels ready to make the song into a real song, I would love to hear from you.
So maybe we can borrow the rights to that Coca-Cola theme song from 20 years ago. If you like to make the world your place to smile, it's the real thing.
Teach the world to sing.
Yeah, right. That wonderful theme. Yeah.
And you could run it through AI and see what happens. I saw this the other day on a show where they had a song created through AI just
Yeah.
with prompts, and it didn't sound bad at all. It was bizarre that a bot wrote it.
I'd like to teach leaders to be human. That's a
And we're doing it through AI.
So let me ask you a question, Stephen, as we come to near close on this. And I want everybody to jump in on this. Okay, this is back to work after Labor Day, right? You know, even Paris is going back to work. So because it's September 1 and everything opens up again, if you will. Will there be people going back to the office? Are managers, leaders telling people it's okay, post Labor Day time, show up in the office a couple of days this coming week?
I don't know, Ed. I think most companies by now have made their policy decisions. I don't, they're living with it. Maybe some will modify it a little bit for the last. I think, I don't know. I honestly don't know. There's such a diversity or myriad of situations out there between hybrid work and working from home and coming back to the office. And, I think again, flexibility is going to be important. Agility is, you can't lead, maybe you can't lead the entire company the same way. I mean, and of course you got the worst example happening right now where Starbucks has the back to work, back to the office policy, and then just hired a CEO who's going to commute from, I don't know if it's Orange County, but somewhere in the Newport Beach area with the company plane. Part of his package is he gets a company plane to fly back and forth from Southern California up to Seattle. So he's now leading an organization remotely that has a kind of a back to the office policy. I don't think Gen Z is going to accept that very well.
No.
I think I'm going to see a lot of people saying, you know what? I'm going to stay. I think Starbucks will have a lot of employee turnover in January, February. I mean, people stick it out this year. If they're on a bonus package, they'll wait to see what jobs are happening. And then, come January or February, there can be a lot of people moving from Starbucks, I think, if this continues. That's just my guess.
Even if they stay, it's going to impact morale significantly.
Yeah.
Interesting.
What a mixed message.
Yeah.
Yeah, wow.
Exactly.
So
As I say,
Angie,
how does I do?
Angie, we did a show about a year or so ago, maybe more, which and you named it the 10 Commandments of Mobility.
Mhm.
Do you recall that? The 10 Commandments, it's not a biblical thing, although it could be.
I distinctly remember this show because it was hilarious, and at the same time, educational.
Yeah.
And I'm still using the 10 Commandments. I'm going to hold a talk on Monday on inclusive recruiting. How can we become more inclusive in the recruiting process in Switzerland? Because that's a big issue when we speak about war for talent. And I'm going to use the 10 Commandments in that talk. I'm holding a workshop on Tuesday where I'm going to use the 10 Commandments. So it was actually something really helpful. Instead of doing most, there are a lot of companies out there that are producing trend reports every year. And I was doing that for a while. I was looking at what is going on in global mobility. So every year I was doing my trends for the next lectures that I'm holding. But I felt like I want to do something that is a bit more tangible and can also be used for a few years and not repeating everything that other people are already doing. So, yeah.
So the 10 Commandments refer to how companies should or should not manage the situation.
Yeah, they were for the global mobility managers. So they get a practical way of how to work with the expats, the expat population. One of my missions was until today to bring the human touch back into global mobility. So a lot of it is about how we can actually do that.
Did you extend that, Angie, into 10 commandments for leading remote workers?
It's a
Taking-
great idea.
Taking
Yeah.
your concept of multicultural and leadership across borders and stuff like that, and maybe create something not so that it's more for all leaders who have, one of the problems I've found, like particularly like in U.S., the oil industry, for instance, in Houston, I've worked with many of the companies down there, and they have people who have never left the United States. Some have barely ever left Texas, and yet they're managing teams in Poland or Brazil or India, and they're frustrated. They have no idea how to lead remote teams, and so I know, just a thought crossed my mind: 10 commandments for leading remotely.
Excellent ideas. Thank you. I've got
That-
stuff to work on.
Okay, let's get
We
ready
got
for,
Broadway shows, we got TV shows, we got musicals, we got management programs.
And
Great
don't
discussion,
forget the
guys.
books. Don't forget the books to write.
Yes.
okay, so Christian, how's your job search going? Talking to the audience out there.
Okay. Well, I'm not really scouring the ads so much anymore. My goal right now is more on learning what I could do, where I could go. I have some conversations with some of the people that have been on the show that I met through you, Ed. So thank you very much for that. And that is very, very helpful. Am I also currently still working on an AI project that I got through Melissa Poots? It's now the fourth month that I'm in it, and my job is to write or review questions, tasks that AI can't answer properly. And it's very, very interesting. It's very difficult because it takes me back to college. My field of expertise is in linguistics and English and American literature. It has nothing to do with mobility at all. And I have to kind of remember how an iambic pentameter works and that kind of thing. So it's a lot of fun. It's very challenging, and that's also what I'm doing these days. And I get paid for it.
So when you say that iambic pentameter I think I just blew it, but is that
Shakespeare.
Is that listening techniques or understanding people's speaking patterns? Is that what you're referring to?
No, it's literally a line from Shakespeare. And the task, this is one I reviewed a few of them. The writer tricked AI by using meter in a Shakespeare, looking at meter in a Shakespeare line, and then asked AI to analyze what kind of meter it was and how it was constructed. And you could only come to the right conclusion if you read it out aloud, if you read the line aloud, because of course it was meant to be read aloud as in a play. AI can't do that. So that's how AI came up with completely wrong, oh, this is constructed this way. Yeah, it was not, it was wrong. That kind of stuff was very, very interesting because I had to, remind myself, how does this work again? And what are the different kinds of feet in an iambic pentameter, and how, when you read it aloud, how does it sound, and so on. So I had to go back to all that. And AI couldn't do it because AI can't speak it out aloud and see how it works.
If you uploaded an audio file, could AI evaluate it and give you a more correct answer?
Maybe. It's just all text-based. So that's an interesting question. It was all text-based. It was, the typical what you expect AI to do, synthesize, sources and come up with an answer based on synthesized sources, except that if there's no audio file, that doesn't work, right? Because it's not in the sources. That's just an example. There were a lot of these things, and it was great.
So doesn't it sound like you should have a book, a dummy book, AI for Dummies?
Oh, I guarantee that's out there. Guarantee. You mentioned iambic pentameter. It goes back to what I was saying about Angie's book. I remember now we're talking 11th grade English with Miss Guerin and iambic pentameter and Shakespeare. And the phrase was the slowly fading mistress of the world. There's that's the 5. And I would not have remembered that phrase, but for the fact that it's attached to iambic pentameter. Hence, people are going to be remembering more information from Angie's book because of the way that she's put this writing together. I think it's great. AI for dummies, it's got to be out there. And I just wonder if AI for dummies, if you could say, write me a book called AI for dummies, if AI would write it, who knows? But that's
I'm sure you could
prospect.
do that. I'm absolutely sure you could do that.
Angie, I now invite you to repost, show that slide that you did earlier in the program so people could look at that graphic, having heard all this conversation, and now that'll bring it full circle.
Great. And, there's also the link to my author page, angieweinberger.ch, where I have listed all the books that I've published so far. For example, if people are looking for the Global Rockstar album, they will find more information and feedback and other things there about the book.
Angie Weinberger, thanks for being on the show again. Please come back. Thank you, Stephen Howard. We'll see you late Monday afternoon. And Ken Lloyd, someday we're going to meet in person. Maybe we got to do an LA meeting. Paul Falcone has been asking me to do a meeting on the UCLA campus, so maybe that'll be in Westwood. Okay, Christian, someday we're going to meet. It's going to either be here or there. And thank you all, audience, for tuning in. This has been a great show for me. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, everybody. Be well.
Happy weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye all.
Thank you. Bye. Thank you. Thank you.